The courtroom was silent, not a sound, not even a whisper. Then a small voice broke the tension. A 3-year-old girl clutching her teddy bear stepped forward and placed her tiny hand on the head of a police dog sitting beside her. The dog didn't move. He just stared ahead, calm, loyal, waiting. When the judge asked if she had anything to say, the little girl looked up, her eyes full of innocence, and whispered a few words that made the entire courtroom gasp. Even the hardest officers couldn't hold back their tears that day. No, one was prepared for what came next. Stay till the end, because what this child revealed changed everything. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The air inside the courtroom was thick with tension. Rows of people sat in silence, their eyes fixed on the front where a small figure stood. A 3-year-old girl with soft curls and eyes too big for her tiny face. She clutched a worn-out teddy bear in one hand, and beside her, resting his head on the wooden bench, was a large German shepherd wearing a faded K9 vest. The badge on it read, Police Service, Rex. The judge adjusted his glasses, glancing between the girl and the dog. Even he seemed uncertain how to proceed. Cameras weren't allowed, but everyone present knew they were witnessing something that would be remembered far beyond these walls. At the prosecutor's table sat stern-faced officials, their papers neatly stacked, while at the defense side, the child's mother nervously twisted her wedding ring, her eyes glistening with tears she was trying hard to hide. The dog didn't move. His amber eyes stayed locked on the judge, calm yet alert, as if waiting for a command that never came. A low murmur rippled through the crowd. People whispered, "Why is a dog in court? Why a child?" But those who knew the case remained silent. This wasn't a normal hearing. It was a matter of truth, loyalty, and something far deeper. The judge finally spoke, his voice soft but steady. "Let the record show that the K9 unit Rex and the minor witness Emma are present." Emma turned toward Rex and gently placed her small hand on his head. The dog's tail gave a slow, single wag, almost like acknowledgement. For a moment, the entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Then, without warning, the little girl looked up at the judge and whispered something, her voice barely audible, yet clear enough to still the air. No one knew it yet. But those few innocent words were about to unravel everything they thought they knew about this case. The story behind this courtroom scene had begun months earlier, on a night that would forever change a quiet suburban town. Officer Daniel Hayes, a decorated police officer and proud father, had left home for what was supposed to be a routine call, a domestic disturbance on the outskirts of town. At his side was his loyal K9 partner Rex, a German shepherd trained not just for law enforcement, but for protection, rescue, and loyalty beyond measure. It was raining heavily that night, the streets slick and quiet. Dispatch recorded Daniel's calm voice confirming his arrival at the scene. Then, moments later, chaos erupted over the radio. Gunfire, shouting, and finally silence. When backup arrived, they found Daniel gravely wounded and Rex lying beside him, his fur matted with blood, refusing to leave his handler's side. Despite Rex's injuries, he had dragged Daniel several feet closer to cover, staying beside him until paramedics arrived. Daniel didn't survive, but Rex did, barely. The town mourned the fallen officer, calling him a hero, but soon whispers began. Some claimed Rex's aggressive instincts had caused confusion during the confrontation. Others defended him, insisting the dog had tried to save his partner. The department, under public pressure, launched an internal investigation. It wasn't just about Officer Hayes' death. It was about whether Rex would ever serve again, or worse, be removed from the force permanently. Daniel's wife, Emily, was devastated. Their daughter, Emma, too young to understand, would often sit beside Rex, patting his fur and saying, "Daddy's friend." It was the only time the dog's eyes softened. Now, months later, the case had reached its final stage, the courtroom. Evidence had been presented, testimonies heard, and emotions tested. But nothing had prepared anyone for what was about to unfold, because the truth about that night, the truth only one loyal dog and one innocent child truly knew, was about to surface. In the weeks that followed Officer Hayes' funeral, the world seemed to slow down for his little family. Emily often sat by the window at night staring at the rain, the same kind that had fallen the night Daniel never came home. But what broke her most wasn't the silence. It was watching Rex sit by the front door every evening, waiting for a man who would never return. Rex was no longer just a police dog. He was family. After the department released him from duty for medical recovery, Emily brought him home. At first, she feared the memories would be too painful, but Emma, their 3-year-old daughter, had other plans. The first night, Emma toddled up to the huge shepherd without hesitation. "Hi, Rex," she said softly, touching his muzzle with her tiny hand. The dog, once tense and alert, lowered his head and let out a low sigh, almost as if he recognized her touch from the nights Daniel used to carry her. From that day on, they became inseparable. Wherever Emma went, Rex followed, to the garden, to her playroom, even sitting beside her as she watched cartoons. Sometimes Emily would catch her whispering secrets to him, her little hand resting on his fur. Rex would simply listen, patient and still, as though he understood every word. One afternoon, Emma placed her teddy bear beside Rex and said, "You can have Daddy's spot." The dog's ears perked up, his eyes soft and distant. In that small home filled with grief, the two of them began to heal each other. A child too young to understand loss, and a dog who understood it all too well, but neither knew their bond would soon be tested in a place no one expected, a courtroom. It was a quiet morning, when the letter arrived, unofficial, sealed, and heavy with words that made Emily's hands tremble. The envelope bore the emblem of the State Court of Justice. She sat at the kitchen table, staring at it for several seconds before finally opening it. As she read, her heart began to race. The letter stated that Rex, the late Officer Hayes' K-9 partner, was to appear in court as part of the ongoing investigation into the mission that had claimed Daniel's life. The department wanted to review whether the K-9's behavior during the operation had directly contributed to the tragedy. In legal terms, Rex was now evidence. Emily covered her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. "They can't be serious," she whispered. But they were. The department's reputation was on the line, and the only survivor from that chaotic night, aside from Rex, was a wounded suspect who blamed everything on the dog. That night, Emily sat on the floor beside Rex, holding his collar gently. "They think you did something wrong," she said softly. The shepherd tilted his head, his amber eyes calm but questioning. Emma, sitting nearby, looked up from her coloring book. "Rex didn't do bad things," she said firmly. "He's Daddy's hero." Emily's throat tightened. How could she explain to her daughter that sometimes even heroes were questioned? The next day, she received another call, this time from the precinct. They requested Rex's presence in court the following week. He would be evaluated by a K-9 behavior specialist and brought before the judge. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Emma hugged Rex tightly and whispered, "Don't worry. I'll come too." Emily froze hearing those words. Maybe she was too young to understand. Or maybe she understood better than anyone, because when the day came, Emma would indeed walk into that courtroom, hand in paw with the dog her father had called his partner. That night, Emily lay awake, staring at the ceiling while the soft sound of rain tapped against the window. Every corner of the house still carried Daniel's presence. His uniform neatly folded in the closet, his badge framed on the mantel, and Rex's leash hanging beside the door where he had always left it. The thought of walking back into a courtroom, facing questions about the man she loved and the dog he trusted with his life, made her stomach twist with fear. She sat up quietly, her thoughts heavy. What if they take Rex away? That was her greatest fear, losing another piece of Daniel. Rex wasn't just a dog anymore. He was living proof of the bond her husband had built, of loyalty and love that refused to die. In the dim glow of the hallway light, she saw Emma asleep on the rug beside Rex. The shepherd lay protectively curled around her, his head resting near her small hand. The sight brought tears to Emily's eyes. She knew she couldn't shield either of them from what was coming. The next morning, she made the call. Her voice shook as she confirmed their attendance in court. When she hung up, she found Emma standing in the doorway clutching her teddy bear. "Mommy, are we going to help Rex?" she asked. Emily knelt down and brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "Yes, sweetheart," she whispered. "We're going to tell them the truth." Emma smiled, her innocent confidence unshaken. "Rex didn't do bad things. Daddy said he's a good boy." Emily hugged her tightly, feeling the sting of tears. That was the moment she made her decision. They would stand together. No matter what the world said, they would fight for the dog who never stopped protecting them. The morning of the hearing arrived with a gray, overcast sky. Emily stood in front of the courthouse steps, her hands trembling as she adjusted Emma's tiny coat. The little girl held Rex's leash firmly, her face serious in a way no 3-year-olds should ever be. Beside them, the German Shepherd walked in perfect sync, his steps slow and steady, his polished badge glinting faintly in the dull morning light. People turned as they entered, some whispering, others simply staring. A child and a dog walking into court was not something anyone saw every day. Reporters gathered near the entrance, murmuring questions Emily didn't answer. She kept her head down, one hand on Emma's shoulder, the other clutching Rex's service documents. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with curiosity. Officers, lawyers, and officials filled the benches. Many recognized Rex, the once praised K9 now standing trial for his own loyalty. Even the bailiff hesitated as he led them forward. "You can sit over there, ma'am," he said softly, gesturing to the front row. Rex sat obediently beside Emma, his gaze scanning the room with quiet alertness. His presence was commanding, not aggressive, just dignified, as though he understood exactly where he was. The judge, an older man with kind eyes, watched the pair enter and paused before speaking. "Let the record show that the late officer Daniel Hayes' K9 partner, Rex, is present, accompanied by the officer's widow and child." A hush fell. Emily's breath caught. She could feel dozens of eyes on her, judging, pitying, waiting. Then, just as the proceedings began, Emma leaned down and whispered something to Rex. The dog's ears twitched, and he let out a quiet breath, a sound almost like a sigh. The moment was fleeting but powerful. Even the courtroom's cold silence seemed to soften as the sight of that small girl and her father's loyal dog reminded everyone that this wasn't just a case. It was a story about love, loss, and the truth waiting to be heard. As the judge settled into his seat, the prosecutor stood, his sharp suit and colder tone filling the room with an air of authority. "Your Honor," he began, "this case may seem unusual, but we are here to determine whether this K9, Rex, acted recklessly during the mission that cost Officer Daniel Hayes his life." His words were crisp, almost clinical, but they struck Emily like knives. He clicked a remote, and a grainy body cam recording appeared on the courtroom screen. Rain poured down in the footage, sirens wailed faintly in the background, and 2 figures could be seen moving through the shadows, Daniel and Rex. "This is the moment before the chaos," the prosecutor narrated. "Note how the K9 breaks formation, charging forward before receiving the handler's command." A murmur spread through the courtroom. Emily's heart clenched. She remembered that night, how Daniel had always trusted Rex's instincts more than anyone's orders. The prosecutor continued, his voice steady. "That split-second decision led to a gunfight, one that resulted in the death of a decorated officer. Ladies and gentlemen, this was not loyalty. This was undisciplined aggression." Rex sat still beside Emma, his head slightly bowed, eyes fixed on the screen as though recognizing the scene before him. Emma, confused but sensing the tension, looked up at her mother. "Why is he saying bad things about Rex?" she whispered. Emily placed a trembling hand over her daughter's. "Because they don't know the whole story yet," she murmured. The prosecutor turned toward them. "And while we all respect the late Officer Hayes," he said pointedly, "we must face the facts. This animal acted without command and caused a tragedy." The defense attorney rose to object, but before the judge could respond, a deep growl echoed softly from beside the bench. Rex's eyes were fixed on the screen, his body tense. The entire courtroom went silent. It wasn't anger. It was grief. A dog remembering the moment he lost his best friend. As the prosecutor's voice echoed through the courtroom, Emma's small fingers tightened around Rex's fur. She didn't understand everything being said, but she knew one thing for certain. They were talking about her daddy's best friend like he was bad. And that hurt. Rex, ever still and obedient, remained seated beside her, but Emma could feel his quiet unease. His breathing had quickened, his muscles slightly tensed. She leaned closer, whispering softly, "It's okay, Rex. I'm here." The German Shepherd let out a faint whine, almost in response, his gaze lowering to the floor. Emily tried to focus on the proceedings, but her attention kept drifting to her daughter. Emma's lips trembled, her little eyes glistening. Every harsh word from the prosecutor seemed to land heavier on her heart. She finally tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mommy," she whispered shakily. "Rex didn't hurt Daddy, he saved him." "Why are they lying?" Emily's throat closed up. She brushed a tear from her daughter's cheek and tried to smile, though her own eyes were wet. "Sometimes people don't know the truth yet," she said gently. "But they will." As the prosecutor wrapped up his argument, the room buzzed with whispers. Emma could no longer sit still. She slid off her chair and wrapped both arms around Rex's neck, burying her face in his fur. The dog didn't move. He just leaned slightly into her, as though reassuring her that he could take the weight of her small, trembling body. Across the room, even the judge paused to watch the silent embrace. The sight of the little girl clinging to the accused K9 pierced through the cold formality of the courtroom. For the first time that morning, no one spoke. Because in that moment, everyone saw something the evidence couldn't show: love, loyalty, and innocence refusing to be silenced. The courtroom door opened, and a tall man in uniform stepped inside. His stride was steady but heavy, like someone carrying memories too painful to leave behind. Emily's eyes widened. It was Sergeant Cole, Daniel's former partner. He had been there the night everything went wrong, taking the stand. Cole adjusted his badge and looked toward the defense table, where Rex sat quietly beside Emma. His voice, when he spoke, was calm but cracked at the edges. "I served with Officer Hayes for 5 years. I was there the night he died. And I'm here because people need to know what really happened." The prosecutor folded his arms. "Proceed, Sergeant," he said, tone cautious. Cole took a breath. It was chaos that night. Gunfire, shouting, darkness everywhere. We were cornered behind an abandoned truck when Daniel gave Rex the signal to move. He didn't break command, he followed it. Gasps rippled through the audience. Cole continued, his eyes glistening. There was a second suspect none of us saw. Rex went after him. He disarmed the man, bought Daniel precious seconds. When the explosion happened, Rex came back, dragging Daniel toward safety. The courtroom fell utterly silent. The prosecutor tried to interject. But the footage, Cole cut him off, his voice rising with emotion. "The footage doesn't show what happened after the blast. That dog never abandoned his partner. He stayed beside him until backup arrived. If it weren't for Rex, we wouldn't have recovered Daniel's body at all." Emily covered her mouth, tears spilling freely. Even the judge's eyes softened. Cole turned toward Rex and whispered, "You did good, boy. You did everything you could." At those words, Rex lifted his head slightly, his ears twitching, as if recognizing the familiar voice from the night his world fell apart. In that instant, no one saw a K9 accused of failure. They saw a soldier, a hero who had done exactly what he was trained to do: never leave his partner behind. When Sergeant Cole stepped down from the witness stand, the courtroom was wrapped in stunned silence. Even the prosecutor, who moments earlier had been confident and composed, now shuffled his papers nervously, avoiding eye contact with the defense table. The truth had begun to pierce through the fog of accusation, and everyone felt it. Judge Morrison leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, the only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioner. Finally, he sighed and spoke. "We'll take a short recess before proceeding. 10 minutes. His gavel tapped lightly, not out of irritation, but contemplation. He needed time to think. As people began to move, Emily exhaled deeply. Her hands trembled as she gathered her things. Rex remained perfectly still, his gaze fixed on the front of the courtroom, his breathing calm but alert. Emma tugged gently on his leash. "Come on, Rex," she whispered, leading him to a quiet corner near the window. The dog lay down beside her, resting his head on her lap. Emma stroked his fur slowly, her small fingers tracing the edge of his badge. "Daddy said you're brave," she murmured softly. "I know you didn't do anything bad." Emily watched them, her heart heavy yet full of pride. Around them people whispered, officers, journalists, strangers. But the mother and daughter tuned it all out. For those few minutes, the courtroom no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt like a sanctuary, a space where grief, love, and loyalty intertwined. Judge Morrison watched from his seat quietly, his gaze resting on the girl and the dog. He had seen hundreds of cases, thousands of witnesses, But never before had he seen innocence and devotion speak louder than words. And deep down, he already knew, the truth was beginning to show itself. When the court resumed, everyone settled back into their seats, but the atmosphere had changed. The earlier tension had softened, replaced by quiet curiosity. Even the judge seemed different, thoughtful, as if weighing something beyond mere evidence. Before the next witness could be called, Judge Morrison raised a hand. "Before we proceed," he said, his tone calm but firm, "I've received an unusual request from the defense." He adjusted his glasses and looked toward Emily and her daughter. "The minor witness, Emma Hayes, wishes to speak." A wave of murmurs rippled through the room. The prosecutor immediately stood. "Your Honor, she's 3 years old." "This is highly irregular." "I'm aware," the judge interrupted gently. "But I also believe some truths don't come from reports or footage. They come from the heart. If she wants to speak, we'll allow it, within reason." Emily froze, her pulse quickening. She hadn't expected this. Her eyes darted to Emma, who was already looking up at the judge, calm and unafraid. "Can I?" she asked softly. The judge nodded. "Yes, sweetheart. You may." A hush fell over the courtroom as Emily lifted her daughter and guided her to the stand. Rex followed quietly, his nails clicking softly on the floor, never leaving her side. The bailiff hesitated but allowed it. No one dared separate them. Emma sat down, her small legs dangling above the floor. She looked around at all the serious faces staring back at her. Then she turned to Rex and gave his ear a gentle pat. "It's okay, boy," she whispered. The judge leaned forward slightly. "Emma," he said kindly, "can you tell us what you remember about that night?" The little girl nodded once, holding her teddy bear tight. "Yes, sir," she said, her voice clear and steady. And in that moment, as every adult held their breath, no one knew that the next few sentences from this child would change the course of the entire trial. The entire courtroom fell into stillness. The judge's pen hovered above his notes. Reporters forgot to breathe. Even the prosecutor lowered his gaze as Emma shifted slightly in her seat, her teddy bear clutched tight against her chest. Rex sat at her feet, unmoving, his head tilted toward her as if he already knew what she was about to say. Emma took a shaky breath. "I remember that night," she began, her tiny voice echoing through the room. "Mommy was crying. I was hiding under the blanket because it was raining loud. Then Rex started barking, really loud, like he wanted help." Her words came slowly, innocent but heavy with truth. Emily's hands trembled, tears filling her eyes. The judge leaned forward. "Go on, sweetheart," he said gently. Emma nodded. "Daddy was hurt. I saw him on the ground when they showed me on the computer later. But Rex didn't leave him. He licked Daddy's hand. He kept barking and barking. He didn't want to go." Her voice cracked, but she pressed on. "Mommy told me Daddy went to heaven, but Rex stayed to make sure he wasn't alone." The courtroom was utterly silent. A few officers wiped their eyes discreetly. The prosecutor swallowed hard, his argument dissolving in the face of a child's truth. Emma looked down at Rex, her tiny fingers curling in his fur. "He tried to save Daddy. I heard the man on the radio say help was coming." Rex didn't move. He waited, even when the fire started. Her words hung in the air like a prayer. Even Rex seemed to feel it. His ears drooped, his eyes glistened. Then Emma looked up at the judge and whispered, "Daddy said good dogs never leave their partners." "Rex didn't. He's Daddy's hero." The courtroom broke. Some sobbed openly. Even Judge Morrison's eyes shimmered. He cleared his throat, struggling to regain composure. "Thank you, Emma," he said softly. "You've said more than enough." As Emily rushed forward to hug her daughter, Rex stood tall beside them, not as an accused, not as evidence, but as what he had always been, a hero who understood love better than most humans ever could. The air in the courtroom was thick with emotion. Emma's words lingered long after she stepped down from the stand, leaving behind a silence that no one dared to break. Even the judge sat still, pen unmoving, his eyes distant, as if seeing the story unfold before him, not through reports or footage, but through the heart of a child. Moments later, the defense attorney stood. "Your Honor," he said, voice trembling with conviction. "With the court's permission, I'd like to present newly recovered evidence, the full body cam footage from Officer Hayes's vest." Gasps filled the room. The prosecutor hesitated, then gave a stiff nod. The lights dimmed slightly as the footage began to play on the large monitor. The sound of rain filled the speakers. Officer Hayes's calm voice cut through the static. "Rex, stay close." The dog's silhouette appeared beside him, alert and steady. Then a shout, followed by gunfire. The chaos that followed was deafening, but then came the moment everyone had doubted, Rex charging forward. Only now the new footage revealed the truth. Another gunman had emerged from the shadows, aiming directly at Daniel. Rex had reacted not out of confusion, but to save his handler. He leapt, tackling the suspect just as the explosion occurred. When the smoke cleared, the video showed something few could watch without tears. Rex limping through debris, grabbing Daniel's vest in his teeth, and dragging him toward cover, barking frantically for help. Even as flames spread, the K-9 refused to leave. The video ended, leaving the courtroom in silence once more. Judge Morrison removed his glasses, wiping his eyes discreetly. "That will be enough," he whispered. Then he looked toward Rex, who sat quietly, ears low, eyes humble. The truth speaks for itself. No one dared to speak. For the first time since the hearing began, everyone knew Rex had never failed. He had fulfilled his duty with a loyalty that transcended words, even when the world chose to doubt him. The tension in the courtroom was unlike anything anyone had ever felt. Every eye was fixed on Judge Morrison as he shuffled the papers before him, though he hardly needed them now. The truth was no longer buried in reports or accusations. It had been seen, heard, and felt. Emily held Emma close, her arms trembling as she waited. Rex sat between them, motionless yet dignified, his gaze steady on the judge as if he too awaited the final word. Even the prosecutor, once so firm in his argument, now stood quietly, his face pale and humbled. The judge finally cleared his throat. "This court," he began, his voice carrying a quiet weight, "finds that K-9 Rex acted not out of aggression, but out of unwavering loyalty and courage." A wave of emotion rippled through the room. "In the line of duty," he continued, his voice softening, "Officer Daniel Hayes and K-9 Rex demonstrated the very principles we swear to uphold: courage, service, and sacrifice. Let it be known that Rex is hereby absolved of any wrongdoing and shall be honored for his bravery." The gavel struck once, but the sound was drowned by the quiet. Sobs that filled the air. Emily covered her face, her tears flowing freely, while Emma clapped her tiny hands once, whispering, "See, Mommy, they know he's a good boy." She turned to Rex and threw her arms around his neck. The shepherd responded with a soft whine, pressing his head gently against her shoulder. Even hardened officers in the back row wiped their eyes. The prosecutor approached the defense table and placed a respectful hand on Rex's back. "I was wrong," he said quietly. "He's a hero." Judge Morrison stood, emotion thick in his tone. Court dismissed, and as everyone rose, Rex lifted his head high, not as a defendant walking free, but as a soldier finally recognized for the loyalty that never wavered, even in the face of loss. Outside the courthouse, the afternoon sun broke through the clouds for the first time that day. Reporters stood silently, cameras forgotten, as Emily stepped out with Emma and Rex. The little girl clung to the dog's leash with one hand and her mother's with the other, her tiny face glowing with pride. Rex walked beside her, head held high, the gold K-9 badge on his collar gleaming in the light. For the first time in months, Emily felt she could breathe again. The storm that had shadowed her family's name had finally lifted. She knelt beside Rex, cupping his face in her trembling hands. "You brought him home that night," she whispered, her voice breaking. "And today, you brought peace back to us." The dog leaned into her touch, his eyes soft as if understanding every word. Emma crouched beside him, wrapping her little arms around his neck. "Daddy said heroes never leave," she murmured. "You stayed, Rex. You stayed." The shepherd gave a gentle wag of his tail, his gaze lifting toward the horizon as though searching for the man he once served beside. The world seemed to still around them, the hum of traffic fading, the sound of distant sirens replaced by a quiet peace. A few officers from Daniel's precinct approached, their expressions solemn yet grateful. One of them bent down, patting Rex's back. "You did good, buddy," he said softly. "Your partner would be proud." Emily stood, her eyes misty but bright. "He already is," she replied. As they walked toward their car, the courthouse behind them echoed with the faint sound of applause. Not official, not rehearsed, but genuine. Strangers, officers, even journalists clapped as Rex passed, honoring not just a K9 but the bond between a man, his family, and a dog who refused to give up. Before getting in, Emma turned back one last time, smiling through the sunlight. "Bye-bye, Daddy," she whispered to the sky. "Rex is coming home." And as they drove away, the camera lingered on Rex's calm face, the face of a hero who had lost everything but never his purpose.